Cryptids, Bigfoot, Dogmen, Mothman, and others. Do they really exist? Or is it just mass hysteria, misidentification? Or maybe it's just the biggest and longest running and most successful of all hoaxes of all time? Let's find out together. Hi, hey, welcome to the podcast. I'm Robbie. This is Lance. How you doing today, Lance?
Doing good, Robbie. Appreciate you having me here.
Good. I guess for the first episode, we're just going to kind of, breaking new ground. We're just going to talk and just see what happens from the podcast. So you want to introduce yourself, tell a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely, Robbie. I appreciate you having me here, man. Just kind of dipping our toes into the water here and seeing what we could come up with as far as interesting topics and what might be fun to discuss. My name's Lance. I've been in the outdoors and upstate all my life. We've hunted, fished, hiked all over from Jones Gap and up in the mountains down to gator hunting in the low part of the state, Santee Cooper, the Savannah River, just all over, man. And it's fun to think about these things that you and I have been discussing, and some of the different crazy things that may or may not be out there.
Right. Cool. And I'll introduce myself too. I'm Robbie. Been a police officer for about 26 years in the upstate. Also, pretty avid outdoorsman, hunter, fisher. Haven't roamed as far in the state as you have, Lance, but I've been out there. And I've always been a person that believes some of this stuff is there. But I know there are plenty of people out there who are either on the I'm completely and totally against it side of it going, and then there are people like you who are like, I'm not saying it does, and I'm not saying it doesn't.
Yeah, that's exactly where I'm at. I've always been interested in these kind of things, since I was growing up, and I hate to say it, I attribute a little bit to my mom. She and I used to love to watch science fiction movies together. Anything from vampires to werewolves, just the fun stuff that Hollywood would come up with. And as I grew and my taste grew in different topics like that, I just kept on. And, like we talked about before, I'm not completely convinced that they're there, but nobody can disprove it either. You can't tell me that they don't exist. And I love the idea that they might be out there. There's enough room. There's got to be enough room. From what you look at the Pacific Northwest, we're getting a little bit out of South Carolina, but you look at the vastness of what that ecosystem could hold potentially. You can't tell me that something couldn't exist out there. We're constantly finding new species in places like the Amazon, and I know I'm jumping around crazy here.
It was like the mountain gorilla. It was not discovered or documented by Western civilization until the 1930s, 1950s, somewhere around there.
Somewhere around
People
there.
thought, there's a giant hairy black ape running around in the Congo, and but people were called crazy for that. And all of a sudden now you can go to the Greenville Zoo or the Columbia Zoo and see something that to the early part of the 19th century or the 20th century was thought of as not something that didn't exist.
Yeah, absolutely. 1902, it was I think it was actually a German officer named Robert von Behring, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Thanks, Google. Prior to that time, they only thought lowland gorillas existed, had no clue that these mountain gorillas existed. And these are not small animals.
No.
This is not something you think you would miss.
Well, and let's go back to that. We talk about small animals. I mean, you're a hunter. I'm a hunter. Have you ever seen a bear skeleton in the woods?
Absolutely not. That's a great example of what you're talking about.
I haven't either.
We
know they exist.
Absolutely. Both of us are located here up in upstate South Carolina. And I'll give you a great example. Where we're sitting right here in a little cabin in the woods, not 200 yards from here, there has been bear moving in and out. But I defy you to go out there and prove to me that they have been. Right. Because I've seen them with my own eyes. They just moved in and out of this gully that we're sitting on right here. You wouldn't think it. This is, we're not terribly far out in the woods. There's still civilization here. And you would, think people would make more of it than what, has come. but they're here.
Yeah. Oh, I've personally seen them in the city where I'm a police officer.
Yeah.
I've worked a wreck one time where one ran out in front of a car.
Yeah,
and got up and ran off.
That's a great example of something that does exist in and amongst us, and
you don't see it more than you think you should because we know it's there.
Yeah, and still, you're talking about two different things. We're talking about a legit, just wild creature, something that all it knows how to do is eat, sleep, reproduce. That's the three main goals. There's no, for lack of a better word, sentience there to where it has any goals or values outside of just purely surviving. To me, my opinion, creatures like cryptids, Bigfoots, Bigfoot at the very low end of the spectrum as far as intelligence, but still there's a spark of, I don't know, for lack of a better word, humanity, to where it is actively trying not to be seen. So you take something like a bear that just lives and it does its things, and people just barely get glimpses of it. But you throw in the mix, hey, it's trying not to be seen, and you get something like the Bigfoot.
And you can even throw like things like the Dogman in there, because you would have to assume that something like that has got to have some form of intelligence.
Oh, absolutely.
And let's go ahead and address the elephant in the room when we start talking about things like the Dogman. Bigfoot, obviously, it's widely considered that it's possibly one of the great apes, maybe even the missing link. I'm not sure if I go that route myself on it. I think it's a great ape, which we all know are very intelligent. I mean, we've seen the gorillas that know how to do sign language, the chimpanzees using tools, things like that. So we know that animals like that are intelligent.
Yeah, even outside of human interaction. You're
right.
talking about animals in the wild that have developed the use of tools in and amongst yourself, not with the influence of man.
So we know that if Bigfoot exists, and if Bigfoot is a relative of the great apes that we're at right now, we know it has some form of intelligence.
Some form of intelligence, yes.
So let's address the elephant in the room with the other things, with these other cryptids like Dogmen, Mothman, things like that. These are not, in my opinion, I don't know what your opinion is. In my opinion, this is not like the Hollywood thing. I don't know that and I'm not saying it couldn't, but I'm not saying that some guy has been bitten by a wolf or drank water out of a wolf's paw, or,
yeah.
Worn a wolf pelt and he's turned in, deals with the devil, demons, that kind of stuff. That can enter into it, and stuff like that could be something that you may have, but the true Dogman that most of these sightings are based on, in my opinion, I believe is some type of animal. It may be like a dire wolf offshoot that is just...
So you're saying that it's not necessarily something supernatural?
I don't personally think that all the sightings are. Now, I'm not saying that it can't be that. I'm just saying I
Sure.
don't think most of these sightings are a supernatural Hollywood werewolf where a guy's turned into or metamorphosized into, like we talked about before we started recording, your favorite werewolf movie, The Howling.
The Howling. You can't beat The Howling. Guys, if you haven't watched The Howling, you got to get online. I'm sure there's somewhere you can download it or pirate it. Not saying that I recommend it, but...
What got Joe Dante the gig is the director of Gremlins was that movie. Rick Baker actually started out doing the effects, and then they pulled him away, hired him for American Werewolf in London, but the guy that what was the guy's name that finished the special effects?
And see, that's where you're touching on a subject I actually just read a little bit about this week, and not trying to get too far in the bushes here, but CGI is so overused here lately, and don't get me wrong, we've came leaps and bounds in what CGI technology holds in the movies and entertainment, but back then when you just had the special effects and the types of photography and the types of camera systems and the way they used them and utilized them to make legitimate special effects, they were phenomenal. With the way his mouth and his nose would stretch when they would turn into a werewolf, and that was not CGI. That was something they did with animatronics and makeup and
practical effects. Practical effects are always going to stand up. Rick Baker's protege, Rob Bottin, was the one that got the job when Rick left the job and went to work on American Werewolf in London. 2 werewolf movies that actually went head to head, in that early 80s.
At the same time.
So, that's...
So, the whole point of that was, you think, or your opinion is that these, sightings of dogmen, of werewolves, of some type of bipedal, stand upright canine may or may not be, you're leaning more on the may not be supernatural.
Yeah, and like I said, it's kind of like you in your intro earlier. I'm not saying that it's not, and I'm not opposed to it, and I'm not one of these people that's going to say absolutely not, it can't be that way. I'm just saying that I believe most of what people have cited is just an animal. Now, can there be something like that, like the Hollywood type werewolf? Oh, absolutely. I mean, I've given examples to people before on other debates where you draw a big circle on the ground or on a piece of paper and say, okay, this circle, let's say it's 4 inches in diameter on the inside. And inside that 4-inch diameter circle represents everything in the known universe. Everything. And ask them to draw a circle inside that circle of what they know. Now, if I asked you to do that, how big do you think your circle is going to be inside that 4-inch circle that everything?
You're at least going to see a representation of it,
Yeah, but it's going to be like the size of a BB probably. Yeah. So, knowing that and knowing that what you know is that small compared to everything else, how can you say, or I or anybody else say, that something couldn't exist outside of that realm of what we know, and that's in quotations that we know, because we know everything. You know how humans are.
Absolutely.
People are so set on, no, this has to be this way. I know this is this. I know this is that. But you can't know that. This world and this universe is so vast. I mean, just this country, like we talked about earlier, there's so many places in this country that have not been, explored, and we haven't even touched on the oceans yet. I mean,
so absolutely. Like you talked about, running around in the woods as we grew up together and in the same area here. I've done everything from hiking with Boy Scouts, like I said, Caesar's Head, Jones Gap, into where like old dark corners were at the intersection of where Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina meet. There's some wild areas out there. You can't know everything that goes on out there, especially when you're talking about creatures that may or may not want to be discovered.
And I think that's the crux of everything, is people just expect that if Bigfoot or if the Dogmen, why has there not been a body? Why has not been, we kind of touched on it. If these things are mildly intelligent, just mildly intelligent, you're not going to find the remains. You're not going to,
So you're suggesting that maybe they're intelligent enough to where they do something with their deceased? To the point where, I've seen videos online. We've all, seen those internet videos where you've got a supposed mother Bigfoot or a mother Sasquatch taking defense against people when they start messing with their young. So if you can go that far, who's to say they don't bury them? Or
I'll give you a couple examples of that probably everybody has seen, and you just don't think about it when you're starting to ask these negative questions like that. You say you like to watch nature specials and things like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
How many times have you seen crocodiles attacking people for trying to get the eggs out to?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, if a crocodile,
that's the basis of existence.
Yeah, if a crocodile is sentient enough to know, hey, they're messing with my eggs, that's my young, that's the future of my species, and go after that. So on the opposite side of that spectrum, okay, somebody can argue, well, that's because those eggs are alive and they're protecting live young. Okay, I'll give you that one. But how many nature specials have you seen where a mother baboon is carrying around a dead child because it fell out of the tree and died, and they're still carrying that dead baby around?
Absolutely, I have seen those. So, I know exactly what you're talking about. So that kind of touches on the intelligence of it, the humanitarian side of, or maybe that's the wrong word to use, but the humanity of those type of animals and beings, that they are sentient enough to know that, I'm supposed to be sad over this. Is, we as a species have grown to revere the dead for, whatever traditions that we hold. If it's, modern day where we're burying them in crypts and mausoleums or in the ground, or back in different types of civilizations where they may have burned the bodies, or they knew that they had to do something with it. You just didn't leave a body laying there.
Right.
So you're talking about an animal in the woods that may be intelligent enough to where that's why you're not seeing the bodies. I don't know. Are they burying them? Are they stuffing them in a cave? Are they, doing something to where they know they're sought after? There's no reason to give anybody any extra ammunition, so to speak.
And I think they're smart enough, as you touched on it, they're smart enough to think, okay, I need to avoid the humans with the guns. If, I'm not saying that they know we're humans, but I need to avoid those people with the guns.
Yeah.
Or those people with the dogs or whatever. I need to avoid that. Okay, my baby just died. If I leave my baby here, they're going to
take it.
Yeah, they're going to be able to find me. They're going to be able to do. Yeah. So who's to say they're not?
Yeah,
smart
and
enough
listen,
for that?
me being in the woods, me being in outdoors, from deer season to duck season to fishing season, I can tell you right now, animals know when they're being pursued, when the time of the year that deer season comes up. Because I'm sorry, you can go out turkey hunting in the springtime, and man, you can hit a field and get a gobbler up in no time. And look to the left, and there stands the prettiest buck you've ever seen. And he doesn't care, because he knows that shot and that shotgun is not for him. That's for that turkey.
And turkeys are same way.
It rolls November around.
I see turkeys all throughout the year, and then when it's turkey season,
poof, gone.
It's like every one of them has vanished from the face of the earth.
It's the same things. My son has started bass fishing competitively now, and I've always said this. You fish during the week, you're going to catch more fish than you do on Saturdays, because even fish, little fish brains swimming around, they have enough synopsis in there clicking around in their little brains to know that every 7 days the pressure gets harder. I get caught more every 7 days. So those days in the middle, they're going to bite more because they don't have the pressure on them, and they know it. They're a little more free to feed. That whole thing wraps into these animals know what human interaction is,
Right.
And when you add just that little extra touch of intelligence there, man, it can be exponentially more.
Well, that's why it's called hunting. That's why it's called fishing. It's not called catching.
That's
it's
right.
not called shooting.
That's right.
It's called hunting. It's called fishing, because you don't know that you're. So it, it's not beyond the realm of possibility.
That these animals know that they're being looked at,
and that's why you only see the fleeting glimpses, and the small number of people like myself who actually have seen one, and and you get these blurry, grainy videos because it's not like a squirrel, because squirrels are up in the tree.
There's limited intelligence there because, like I said, that is. I want to draw a distinction. I would say, Robbie, that there's a distinction in my mind between. All right, so when we're talking the cryptids, you're talking about your Sasquatch or your skunk apes or your Bigfoots. So that's a little more just natural to me. That's a little more just, it's a straight up animal. All right.
I agree.
So then you draw that line, and then you start, okay, in that same category, I'm trying to think of some other animals that we might can lump into it for future episodes. Mbembe, the South American dinosaur relic.
Brontosaurus type.
Yes, Brontosaurus type. Always been interested in that. I was a dinosaur kid. I was raised in the Jurassic Park era. That was right around when I was in the golden ages of being a kid. And man, the toys came out, and it was super cool. So when I found out that there were books written in the library that I could check out about a dinosaur that may or may not exist in the Amazon, oh man, you can forget about it. Shut the door, son. But so to me, your Bigfoots, your Mbembes, things like Loch Ness Monster, where it's a plesiosaur, maybe a megalodon holdover, swimming around in the Mariana Trench.
I've never actually heard the megalodon theory on the Loch Ness, but that, I mean.
Okay, so not in Loch Ness. What I don't know.
Well, you just talking about megalodon?
I'm just talking about in general.
Okay.
Megalodon in the Mariana Trench, Pacific Ocean, in the depths there. That's a little more just, okay, that's an animal that is smart enough to know how to stay out of the way of humans. Then you make a dividing line, and you step into the realm of what I would consider a little more supernatural. Your Dogmen, the Wendigos, any of the werewolf species like you've talked about, Mothman, Jersey Devil, to where you're starting to throw a little bit more.
Well, I see where you're going with that. Well, like the Jersey Devil, that obviously that's steeped in supernatural.
Oh, absolutely.
Mother Leeds said when she got pregnant with her 13th child, I'd rather have the devil's child, then another 13th child.
And see, I'm telling you guys, I'm stepping into a realm here where I know I'm a little bit outgunned. I'm hoping that my voice of reason is just coming through at that, because Robbie knows his stuff on these kind of things.
It's a long life of boredom and having nothing else to do. But
maybe I'm a little worse at reading and comprehension than what you are. Maybe I like to read and it just doesn't stick.
But I see where you're going with that, and I agree with that. And I can.
Yeah. So there's a couple of different classifications we can look at there.
Yeah, but if you're going to go with that argument too, I guess, and I'm speaking for me, lycanthropy and all that stuff, that's steeped in supernatural myth also.
Oh, it is, absolutely.
You go back to the Greek myth of King Lycan and how he was turned into technically the first werewolf by Zeus.
He's doing air quotes, guys.
Yeah. Well, I talk with my hands.
Absolutely.
But I don't know if you're familiar with it. I'm sure if you know anything about Greek mythology, King Lycan he was a really proud king. He liked to boast. So he invited Zeus over for dinner, and he wanted to prove that Zeus was not as powerful as he claimed to be. So he killed his youngest son and had his youngest son cooked up and served to Zeus to see if Zeus could tell. Well, obviously, Zeus knew right off, and he cursed Lycan and turned him into a savage beast who was, doomed to walk the earth as a beast for the rest of his life. And lycanthrope, which
ipso facto, we have the Howling in 1989.
Because that and I don't know that was the first werewolf myth, but it was sure.
But there again,
very close to. And
you're getting to start in like religion. You're getting to start in supernatural. We haven't even touched on like alternate dimension beings, that kind of stuff. So there's a wide world of these types of creatures.
And, I've read plenty of stories and heard other podcasts where people, a lot of people want to say that Bigfoot is an interdimensional being. Is that true or not? I don't know. I mean, like I said, personally, I think it's just an animal. But now, going back to my diagram earlier, or my analogy with a circle,
what you don't know could fill a book.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And that's not a shot.
And what I know couldn't fill a book.
That's exactly right. You throw back to the old adage: we know more about the surface of the moon than we do the bottom of the ocean.
Exactly.
You can't tell me that we don't know enough about the natural world to make every one of these.
And I think you're the same as me. I've always been that type of person who thinks, once you feel like you know everything, it's time to hang it up.
Yeah, and that's
you're never too old to stop learning. You can always learn more, no matter where you at or what stage of your life you're at. And like I'm 47 years old and start the podcast for the first time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, are you doing that at that age? But it's just we're learning on this stuff.
Absolutely,
it's something we both enjoy talking about, and hopefully somebody else will like listening to it and like listening to our theories and our opinions on it. And while we're on that subject, Lance, we've got an email, and the email is what's really out there 2022 at gmail.com. All one word all together. So if anybody out there listening has got
any kind of stories, especially related to the upstate, because to be honest with you, we're both kind of homebodies. Born and raised here in South Carolina, upstate of South Carolina. So, this is the area we know and we're comfortable with right now. Not saying don't contact us if you've seen some crazy stuff throughout the United States, because, the podcast has a huge reach.
Right.
We want to hear about anything.
And like Lance is saying, we're not afraid to, to dig in to try to find stuff out. And I guess that's a good segue into some of the stuff that we're actually going to start trying to do on this. Obviously, if we can get stories from y'all, the listeners, that would be great. But Lance and I are gonna we're gonna attempt to, and we don't know how many. Lance has got a full-time job. I've got a full-time job, but Lance has got a family too. So
we just do this for fun, guys.
He may not be here for every episode, but what our plan to do with this podcast is, as Lance as an outdoorsman, myself as a police officer, I'm of the you go where the evidence takes you type person, and we're going to try to find different cases, whether it be Bigfoot or excuse me, or the Dogman or Mothman, Jersey Devil, any of those kind of cryptids and things like that, or even alien abductions, things, just whatever we can find as a case wise that piques our interest.
Something that would be fun to discuss.
Exactly, and we're going to try to break it down from our perspectives and our point of views. Mine from the law enforcement standpoint of, okay, where does the evidence point us? Lance from the perspective of somebody who's been in the outdoors and has seen things. We're just gonna talk about it. Like he said, something fun to talk about.
Absolutely.
So, if you got stories, or you got your own encounters, or you've got a story that you want us to look at, like he said, we'd like to stick with the upstate as much as possible. But if you got something from a different state, sure, send it to us. And like I said, that address again is what's really out there 2022 at gmail.com.
That's the number 2022.
Yes, 2022. Thank you for correcting me on that, Lance.
No problem, man.
We'd have
devil's in the details, Robbie.
Exactly. So that's what I got you here for. But like I said,
we'd love to hear from you. Absolutely, we'd love to hear from you. What's your experience? What have you come across? I've got some friends that have experienced some things that are, let's just say, anomalous. Can't really point it to anything other than something that was just a little bit crazy. Robbie, sitting here with me, has seen some things, and we're going to try to get into those in some future episodes. But like I said, to give us a little bit more ammo, we'd love to hear from you to see what you guys have came across.
And I'm friends with, if any of you are out there or like reading fiction novels, things like that, if any of you know D.A. Roberts, I'm friends with D.A. Roberts. He's wrote Lakeview Man, Apex Predator Blood Moon series, the Call of the Wild, Wild Hunt, Odin's Call. That series, very, very, very good series. If you like cryptids and you like military and explosions and shooting things, these are the books for you. And DA is a really good friend of mine, and he's actually got his new book is coming out. I believe it's already out now, if I'm not mistaken. But if you want to go check out his books, those are really good places to start if you like that kind of stuff. But he's probably going to be on some future episodes, maybe.
Man, that would be great.
Yeah, he said that he would help us out as much as he could on this, and I'd like to do a book review and just have him on here and talk. I've been on his show once before, DAX Machina. Another good show to listen to is What If It's True by Cam Buckner. He's another one that has kind of, without knowing it, has led me and by virtue Lance into what we're doing here. So those are some really good podcasts if you want to listen to those. But like he said, we'd love to hear from you. There's plenty of stuff for us to talk. There's no shortage of stories we can find, but there's always stories that we don't know about that it may be your encounter or your story that you haven't told anybody.
I guess what he's saying is we're looking for a little more obscure things, something that may not be right out there in the mainstream that everybody's seen. Right.
Because, and that's not something that you would have to worry about if you don't want us using your name or anything like that.
You don't really know that my name's Lance.
Exactly. Could be something totally different. We'll leave that to the imagination. But like I said, we're looking for things that might be a little bit more obscure. I mean, we can dig out stuff on the internet all day long that that may have been walked over and plowed again.
And like I said, you touch base. That's a big deal. As far as back when I first got interested in this kind of thing, you had to really go look for stuff. Man, you had to physically go into a library and check a book out or get on a microfiche to find something. Right. Now, with everything at your fingertips, there's so much out there. So I don't think there's going to be a shortage of topics that we can actually talk about.
No, you're right. And you kind of touched on that. Is like my encounter, like I said, we'll get into that in later episodes. It happened back in the early 80s. There was no internet back then. You couldn't get online and see if anybody else had seen anything like that. So you felt like you were by yourself. You can now get on.
Man, you've got support groups for Bigfoot encounters and alien abductions and all kind of craziness.
Yeah, you can get on the BFRO right now and you can find out that there are other people about 2 miles down the road from where my encounter was that had an encounter around the same time frame.
That is eerily similar.
Yeah.
Eerily similar.
Yeah, and as somebody who's seen this and people, and you deal with the you're crazy and things like that, it's nice to know that you weren't the only one that saw something like that during that time frame. You weren't the only one that was quote unquote crazy. So it's nice to be crazy with somebody other than crazy by yourself.
Crazy with somebody else is always more comfortable than crazy by yourself.
Exactly. If you're crazy by yourself, you start to wonder. But at least there's more than one person being crazy than. And we're joking and everything. Lance has personally never had that I know of had any kind of encounter, but Lance is also a good friend of mine, and he's somebody that has never judged me for. Well,
now don't get me wrong here, Robbie. So I guess mine may be a little more complicated. I'm one of those. I'm a fox molder. I want to believe, but I need to see some of the evidence here. I need to see the smoking gun. I need to see the body.
And I am too. But I've seen it, so that's
you have seen it. Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, I do lean more on the side of it does exist, because I guess what I'm getting at is there's no reason to doubt that they do or they don't exist. You can't disprove a negative. I guess what I'm saying. You know what I mean? I really want for these things to be real. It's just the fantasy part of it gets caught up, and I love that kind of stuff. I love the fact that there may or may not be something out there. It's just something always been interesting to me.
Yeah, and that's had I not had my encounter, I probably would have still been as interested, but I don't think I would have been as diehard.
Yeah, something like that really pulls you into a subject. Right. It really does. Because, and like I said, that's why you've got a little more versed in these subjects than I do. I'm going to have to rely a little bit more on Google to be able to pull up some of these the hard facts and the hard evidence and some of the names that you can throw out there, because I've always just read the books because I just thought the magic of it was just killer, just so cool. I like that idea, because like I said, you and I both kind of grew up in the same type of era to where those kind of movies were coming on scene, right. and it was a little more real. And man, that's what I grew up on. I love that stuff. And we, this where we're sitting right now is where I played growing up, and me and my friends would come out here with nothing more than just sleeping bag rolls and cans of Vienna sausages, and man, we would camp out for 3 or 4 days back here before I built a house on this property. And no, we never saw anything crazy, but man, in our imagination, that stuff just ran wild. And to know that there are so many documented cases from, you're even talking back in the 1700s, not necessarily just Bigfoot, but all of these different cryptids that are being seen. And there's got to be something to it. Right. There's got to be something to it. And the world's too big a place.
And you get into that. We hadn't even touched into the Native American side of this, where about everything that we've talked about
has a basis.
in the Native American culture.
Absolutely. And there you go again. You can actually call that a little bit of a religion, because that's what that is the way they lived was their religion, right. And that's where it comes from for them.
And, from, like I said earlier, from the law enforcement standpoint, you go where the evidence takes you.
Sure.
You don't, if the evidence says go to the right, you don't go to the left, because the evidence isn't taking you there. And if you look at let's just take the footprints. We were talking earlier about Dr. Melvin, and he's a lot smarter than you or I have ever even thought about being. We know that.
Yeah.
And what it would take to just make a hoax out of just those footprints, and to make that time, or not time span, I'm going to butcher what this is, but the morphology, I think, is the correct term.
Okay.
Of the footprints, from young to old footprints.
And the location that it would happen in, So give us a little brief rundown on what you're talking about here.
Okay, there's been plenty of people who said that the where the phrase Bigfoot was coined in California with a logging company that was seeing all the stuff that 45-gallon drums were tossed down the
So you're essentially talking about the original logging expedition where they've cut in and they've got established roads and they're into the wilderness to where it's outside of civilization's purview.
Way
they
out
start
in the woods
experiencing they start experiencing things that they can't necessarily explain.
So they see like equipment is moved around, some of it's destroyed. They've got 45-gallon oil drums that they're using to fuel the machinery that are just picked up and tossed down the side of a hill.
Something that you or I are not going to be capable of doing.
I mean, you're talking of several hundred pounds worth of fuel and steel for the drum. And then they started finding these footprints. Well, they take pictures of it, they send it out, and a reporter puts the article in there, and in quotations, Bigfoot terrorizes. Well, it caught fire. That's where we get the name Bigfoot. But before that, like we were talking about, all the Native Americans, all the cultures had something like that. That had a different, each tribe
had a representation of what Bigfoot was.
Lakota, Cherokee, all that. They all had some kind of name for this big hairy man. That was, hairy man, wild man, whatever it translated to. And even past that, you go back to Australia's got the Yowie. Asia's got the Yaren. I mean, every culture that you go to has got something like this.
And so, I get what you're saying. The fact is, you couldn't breed this type of a hoax, for lack of a better word, throughout the entire civilization of man, where every different type of culture or person or regional area has their own little variation of it. Like you said, you go where the evidence is. There's some evidence there. There's got to be something to it.
Exactly. So, like we said, you go where the evidence points you. You've got all these footprints. I mean, and just the footprints alone, with the dermal ridges. I mean, Pete Chilcutt, who's a forensic technician, former police officer, he has examined hundreds upon hundreds of these casts, these footprints. They have dermal ridges in them.
Yeah, something that is just super difficult to be able to fake, especially when you're talking about the time period you're talking about.
Yeah, and then there's people who talk about the Patterson-Gimlin footage. Obviously, the most famous Bigfoot.
That's the one where he's walking away and kind of glances over his shoulder looking.
And there are people on one side who say it was fake, but there are plenty of people who are in the movie industry that say at the time that movie or that film was taken,
shot on what, Super 8mm?
I think I'm not 100% sure which one it was, but plenty of people in the movie industry have looked at that and said that at that time
you can't
there was no way that you could have made a suit that realistic. There's been plenty of scientists who look at it that Dr. Melbourne's one of them. That the gait of the creature, that it was almost impossible for a human to. That now you could mimic the movements, but based on all the and. I'm not an expert on this.
Neither one of us are. This is just two Joes talking.
So, me saying that is, I'm basically parroting what I've heard some of these experts say, but I happen to...
Well, everything has to have a basis in something. And
that's going back to...
You're going to get some repeat information.
Going back
just
to
is
evidence.
What it is. But,
I mean, as a police officer, I've interviewed people that are a lot smarter than me that have committed crimes that I've had to catch.
Oh, yeah.
So, just because I may not be as smart as this doctor does not mean that I can't tell if that person is being truthful about what they're saying or not.
Maybe embellishing something or trying to deceive or hide or
leading to how we're going to go about these things in the future or our future things. We may be watching a video together and then breaking it down here and things like that. Some of the classes that I've been through on that, we're going to use that to kind of help us on this journey we're going on.
Sounds good. I'm gonna let you take the lead on this kind of stuff, and listen, man. I'll input when I need to.
We're just gonna sit down, buckle up, and hopefully we'll have a good ride.
Sounds good.
All right. Well, I guess that's gonna do it for the first episode, Lance. I've
enjoyed the conversation. Had a good time talking about it. I hope you guys have enjoyed listening to us blather on about some stuff. And if you're interested in this kind of stuff, like I said, shoot us an email. Robbie, what's that email again?
Email is what's really out there 2022 @gmail.com.
Great, guys. Well, listen, Robbie, we'll catch you next time.
All right. See you, Lance.